Sorry. Afternoon, everybody. This is October 30th, almost Halloween 2020. My name is Jay Leask, and I am joined today by my usual co-host, Craig Janke, who will reintroduce himself in a moment, and
Hello.
special guest, Joy T. Apple.
Hello.
Oh, and this is This Week in Teams.
This is This Week in Teams.
That is.
I think this is like episode 20 for us, right?
It's pretty darn close, yeah. We're finally hitting, well, I mean, we've hit double digits, but finally hitting the next decade of episodes.
There we go.
Yeah.
Story. Exciting.
So yeah, I am Craig. And then Jay said it's the eve of the eve. He's got his Halloween costume on. He's the witch. If you didn't know,
I'm a witch. Yes.
Seat.
Yeah. I mean, this does help fix
this.
This.
What
are you dressed up as, Craig?
Yeah. So this week we're going to talk to Joy T. Apple, a technologist who specializes in Teams and architecture. And from there, I'm going to let you tell everybody else what you do that's really special with Teams. I'm going to throw that out there. Make it sound
really special with Teams. Now it's pressure. So yes, Joy Apple. I always feel like it's a support meeting. My name is Joy Apple, and I do SharePoint.
Yes, it is.
I also do SharePoint and Teams, but it's the perfect match made in heaven because SharePoint's always been our go-to tool for all our stuff. Yeah. And now Teams is our go-to tool for our communication and collaboration. So you put those two together, it's a match made in heaven.
I'm incredibly happy with the changes that have been made on the front end tools, Teams to get people using SharePoint properly, and lists to actually like show people how powerful lists can be. So I'm right there with you. Like the modernization of the UI for the end user over the last couple of years has been amazing.
Well, and the fun thing with lists is, so for those of us that are, I don't know, I won't speak for you, gentlemen, but for people like me that are old and have been around SharePoint for a long time, Microsoft Lists comes out and people are like, oh, it's this next great new thing. And so you're going, lists are older than libraries.
Yes.
Yeah, they've been there for a little while.
But we've rebranded them and they're bright and they're shiny and the templates are new and we finally got we bring Excel in as a list now. Oh, it's so exciting. It's good stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It has been funny to watch people who knew nothing about lists learn about lists and how exciting this new thing was. And I'm like, I'm gonna let you guys have this. I'm gonna let you take that excitement because I don't want to bring it down at all.
Well, now lists are fancy and you can do like color coding on your things and formatting and stuff a heck of a lot easier, because a lot of the stuff that you can do now that you tried to do, that you had to go in and do the JSON and or the so you had to actually, what was it? God, I'm old now. And my memory's gone, but you actually had to go into the list thing. There was a file in the list setting in 2010 and 2007 and update the behind the scenes file so that you could format some of that stuff. And that was not easy.
Hey, I thought I was fancy though the first time in 2007 that I got, like, if a status was set to, late, you got the red. And
yes. And now fancy. Anyone can do that.
Power to the people.
So Joy, you work, gosh, I hope I get this right. You work at Pate Group, right?
I sure do.
What do you do with Pate Group?
So, and it's fun because this week is my 4th anniversary with Pate Group. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes.
Thanks. But I'm a modern workplace strategist, which is a super fancy way of saying that I help my customers and my clients figure out how to get from older versions of on-prem SharePoint or Google Drive or the file share even, and over into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. My primary focus is typically on information architecture, getting the SharePoint sites planned out. What's our company public data? What's our department private data? How is that going to flesh out? What makes sense for bringing Teams in for all of this? Because that's, in my mind, is the foundation of the intranet, is our information and our data. Layer the people on, and then we can layer in the tools and the processes and the automation that those other apps bring to the table.
Yeah, and you've been around SharePoint for a while, I assume?
For a minute. Yeah, 2008
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's about when I started.
Okay. I
inherited the farm. I think you said that before.
Yeah. It was much abused and neglected, and actually that's about the time I became familiar with AvePoint, because we use DocAv. The company I started with, they reorged every 6 months whether they needed to or not.
Yeah.
And migration was not an uncommon thing.
No, it's everywhere. Especially, it's interesting because so in the cloud world, everyone's like, this is your last and final migration.
No.
And I understand where they're coming from. It is kind of the last like big hurrah, moving from that on-premises world to what should be a system that lives more or less in perpetuity. As long as nothing bad happens to Microsoft and nothing bad happens to your organization and you don't change any major strategic goals, the SharePoint Online should be there for you for a long time, which is better than the pattern of every 3 to 6 years moving your entire platform again, right?
Well, as part of that, the old moving of the platform, I'm going to try to segue this and see if it works. With 2010, right, 2007, if I wanted to have that reorg and just move my content around, right, that was a big pain in the butt. If I had a department that was nested 3 levels down in HR and they all of a sudden became part of operations, and I wanted to move it. So I'm going to throw this out for you, Joy. Why is it different now?
I'm going to catch that ball. I'm going to run with it. So how it's different now, oh, we lost Jay, is...
No, I'm here.
Modern architecture is flat. And if people have been around the Microsoft world and the SharePoint world for very long, they've probably heard people like us talking about keeping our structure inside of our libraries flat, not nesting content in a lot of folders. Right. They don't always listen to that, but please don't nest your content deep in folders. Now Microsoft has recommended, I think 2018 was when we first started talking about this, about having flat site architecture. It's a habit, and it's a hard habit to break. In fact, as a trainer for years, when I would first start talking about SharePoint, I would say like pop quiz. What's a SharePoint site collection?
Wait, is that a pop quiz for us?
It is. Do it. Let's just play my game.
Okay. All right. A SharePoint site collection is a boundary around a collaboration space.
Sure. Or you could be simple. Try a simpler version of that, Craig.
I was just going to say a collection of sites.
That's it.
Multiple sites in one container.
Yeah.
But so Jay was fancy with that. I liked it.
Sites. And it's sorry, Jay, but the goal now is to break out that collection of sites and let every site be its own standalone top-level site. And the advantages of that is, aside from, if we had lots of sites in one site collection, we had a lot of content in one content database, right? So that was fun when things went bad. We also had, and this is the most relevant part for me, deep down, tangled up knots of broken permissions. Because everyone could come to this site, but then we would reduce permissions down here, and then we go fewer people here and fewer people here. Except for over here, let's go down 3 levels and let in a whole lot of people. And it was really, really messy. And as an admin from the admin portal, or central administration.
Always about
always. I couldn't really see how many subsites there truly were in that site collection. It was the tip of the iceberg. Now as we start to break that out, a site is a site is a site is a site. So they're all sibling sites, which can feel overwhelming, because now we start to think, oh my gosh, well, what binds our sites together other than the force, right? Our hub sites do. We can start to hubify things and bring our sites that are wide in architecture but related in process or scope, and get that nice family feel back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so. Go ahead.
Said in a while, but man, I forgot about content databases. Like, I've been doing so much in the cloud. I was like, whoa, there's a blast from the past.
Oh yeah. But and the great thing about the way that works now too is, So let's pick on human resources. I pick on them a lot because they're usually the part of our organization that just has so much data.
Right.
And a lot of it, right, is company public. Human resources is a ton of content that as an employee, I need to read it. I have forms I need to fill out. I have information I have to consume. But human resources also has a ton of content that nobody but the right people in HR should ever see. Yep. Because it's my personal employee information. So we can set those communication sites up that everybody can get to the stuff. And then all those functional areas inside of HR can have their own separate team site with their own permissions, set up clean from the start with their /site/wellness, benefits, compensation. And then they also can go to Teams and have their own private collaboration space where they can talk about the work that's going on behind the scenes for the company. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been supporting DoD customers for about a decade on and off. And the biggest conversation I've always had with DoD customers is content reorganization, because the DoD shuffles organizations a lot. Like they have their they have their standard structures, the 6, the 3, the 9, whatever, the IT organization, the knowledge managers, that's always pretty much the same. But when it comes to, does the records team roll up to IT this year, or did it get moved over to somebody else's bailiwick? Like every time there was a change, a subsite that belonged to the records managers had to get moved to the site collection for their new, their new head, their new, the 6 or the 4 or whatever they belong to. And so it's always been that conversation of, okay, our information architecture is built around our organizational structure. We give the parent organization a site collection and they can do whatever they want to do underneath it. And yeah, there's always a broken inheritance problem, or there's a content reorganization that has to happen on a regular basis, but we know where everything is. And like you said, with the flat architecture that we started seeing over the last few years, that initial, until hub sites became more clear, there was a very big concern over how do we actually organize this stuff? How do we build our navigation? Yeah. What I like about this, though, is information architecture now is about the architecture of information much more than the organization of our employees, which I found that was always the first step. And now we can actually focus on, well, how does this relate to what we're trying to accomplish? Yes, still the organization of employees matters, but I think that there's more of a balance now. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree to all those words. In my mind, the way I try to break it down for people first is I say, okay, security first, right? You got this stuff in this bucket. Who should see it? And what is it? Right. And you can ask those questions in any order. And it's funny, my first SharePoint farm that I inherited, my first job was actually working for a company that was a subcontractor to the government, First Defense and Security. So I hear you so clearly on that information restructuring. But the way the tool is now said, you're playing with Legos at this point.
Yeah.
So I can pop this building block off and go attach it to IT if that's where this is going to roll up now. And if we change our mind next year, pop that block off and go stick it under records or whoever's contracts, whoever's going to own it this year. It's a much cleaner process. And the security and permissions are respected no matter where you put it.
Yeah, you're not dealing with a migration, you're dealing with a link change it's a lot. I agree.
An association.
Yeah, that's a much better phrase. Yes.
It's fluid, which I don't know. I think in our IT brains, sometimes we get a little suspicious of stuff if it's not black and white and this is exactly how it is and always will be. But when you've lived the life of reorgs and migrations because of reorgs, and now you see the simplicity that's respecting my permissions. Oh, okay. That's huge.
So how does this all play with Teams? It's one of the big questions we have. You open Microsoft Teams, whether you're on the desktop app, your mobile app, or the browser. The team structure, it's flat. When you've got the most management you have is the things you've pinned, and then the things that you see regularly, and then the things that you've hidden. So how do you talk to your customers about information architecture when it comes to Teams?
Yes.
To keep it flat.
Okay.
Guess what? Typically, not always, but guess what? One of the first questions I get asked when I show people the Files tab for a channel in Teams.
Why isn't there metadata?
I wish that were a question. Usually it's like, so I can put a folder in here if I want to, right?
Yeah.
Because we're human beings. We like that nesting structure. And I try to relate back to talk about your processes and your procedures. Because if we're remembering our architecture, a channel in Teams is, I want to say it, unfortunately, a folder in a library.
Yep.
All right. I've come to terms with that. I'm more or less at peace with that now. I wish it had been another library. That's a topic for another day. But if my channel is a folder, then if we're going to keep it flat, we don't put a subfolder in there. We try another channel first. Because the reason I'm creating a channel is to have a place to organize my content and my conversation around it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm doing something and I'm talking about it with my team at the same time. If I go into my general channel, I can upload a document in the conversation pane, tag the people that need to know about it, send it. It's on uploading and I'm notifying at the same time. It's magic, like your witch costume, right? It's super cool. It's magic.
Yeah.
But if I nest inside a general imported stuff folder, no, I can't do that anymore.
Right.
Right now I have to go into that folder, put my stuff, copy a link to it, go back out to the conversation pane and do a lot of work that really wasn't necessary. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
Keep it easy. If we think about our processes and our information architecture, if we're going to put the work into it to identify it, that means we're probably going to be talking about it. So we just create that channel, keep that channel structure going.
Okay. All right. So when it comes to like your end users who just want it as easy as possible, like how do you talk them through that change from for them it was easy because I could just navigate into my folders and find things. Like how do you talk them through that change?
So have I mentioned him already? My coworker, Stephen Wilson, made a really good point once. We were talking with a client. He said, do you really navigate through that folder structure or do you have a shortcut somewhere? Depends, right? Everybody's different. But a lot of times, like, oh, well, I just know where it is and I have a shortcut or I have a link or have I bookmarked it. So are we really using the folder structure?
Mm-hmm.
If we are, then honestly, it's just talking about the benefits of keeping it flat. So other people don't have to memorize your train of thought to be able to find that folder structure. Because with folders, I'm going to organize them the way it makes sense to me, but that may not be how it makes sense to Craig. But if it's flat, I see it, I click on it, it's there. I don't have to look for it. And my search is going to be so much better because if we start burying our stuff deep, search isn't going to respect it quite as much. So we're going to have some pros and cons, especially when Microsoft Search comes to Teams.
Yeah. Yeah, the enhancements of search I think are something that will help a lot. The other thing I know, so I'm in the public sector space, so I deal with mostly GCC high customers. But in the commercial space, like there was a change in the last 3 or 5 months. I can't remember when this happened because, COVID, no sense of time. But
Yes,
Teams did change the interface, the UI for the Files tab, right? So it had more of a SharePoint look and feel. And in fact, you can get to the different views there. Is that, yeah.
Yes, you can. And I love that because I'm lazy. Okay. I'm just going to put that out here right now. Is that okay? Can I be lazy?
Yes, please.
I don't want to have to look for stuff ever. And search isn't quite the same in Teams these days. I have a tendency to go to the back end. We kind of refer to the SharePoint now as the back end of Teams for a lot of things,
Yeah,
right?
I do that too.
So I go there and I will go create a view called no folders. In fact, in my one of my primary demo teams, I actually have a no folders 2, and no folders 3, because I've done that demo so many times.
Yeah.
And I love that I can just go shortcut my files and just see everything without the folders there. Because I don't want to have to remember which channel to go to. So I cheat.
Yep. No, that's
so I kind of use the files tab on the side and just go there because I usually just want the most recent stuff. So,
yep.
Yeah.
I have to strip all that out. But I do often do what you're talking about, open it up in SharePoint just directly, or it depends what I'm playing with.
Yep. And if it's a team I'm in, so we use Teams on a very project basis because every new client comes in, they get a team. And then we name the channels based off that scope of work we're doing for the customer.
Right.
Which, I mean, it's so easy. It's almost not fair for a standard business because it's going to be a little bit more challenging for HR to think, okay, what are all the channels we need? For us, it's like, oh, do we have a statement of work for it? Make a channel.
Make a channel.
Yeah, it makes it easy. But what I tell people is like, what do you do the most? What do you talk about the most that has content that backs it up? That's your channel.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we need a new team because there's a completely new security boundary. We need a new channel because there's a new topic. Like
Yes.
For my office, our account managers, so I'm on the sales side mostly. So every account manager has their own channel within the public sector space. And then every opportunity for every account manager is its own discussion thread. Thank you, threaded discussions within that channel. So we have a little, there's some proper use guidelines for making sure that all of our opportunity names are in the name of the new discussion thread and things like that. But that's one example. And then on the delivery side, our customers get a team, and then every channel is a new product we're deploying for them. So we can kind of organize those conversations that way. But I like that. I like that on the SharePoint side. I don't even think about the SharePoint side as much anymore. But I like the idea of having that view that just disintegrates all your folders and gives you, access to your stuff. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
I like the look of shock on Joy's face when you said you don't think about SharePoint anymore. That was,
I try
that
not
was classic.
I mean, I am Joy of SharePoint. Come on, people.
Yes.
So I want to add, so we've had this nice little discussion about Teams, channels, and all that. What are your thoughts or feelings about private channels and where those should be used and come in?
So a couple of different thoughts on that. Okay. In my mind, private channels are the Teams version of granular permissions.
Right.
Right. And we've always tried to be like, we secure the largest object possible. And the team side of the world that looks like a channel. If you've been behind the scenes, folks listening at home, you know that it's really not. It's its own SharePoint site collection. And the first time I saw that, I went, what? It's a what? They did what?
Yes.
Yeah.
What?
You weren't alone. It was like Twitter cried out. 1,000 voices.
Oh, yes. The voices rose up. And for a while there, if you went to that site, air quotes here, site collection, and you tried to get to any of the assets around it, it just wasn't there. It was like the shell of a site. It was super freaky. It's actually a full-blown site now, though it's not discoverable in the admin center. Microsoft. You need it there. But I actually have
DocAv, which does show it to you.
It would be discoverable with DocAv. That's
sorry. I'm sorry. Please continue.
So what is this DocAv that we're talking?
Shameless plug. But it's a conversation I have a lot, and I have a Teams best practices presentation that I do with clients quite a bit, and it actually has made its way into my Teams in the architecture presentation I do. And it's a slide that has 2 questions on it and the different scenarios for the answers. And question number one is, okay, we've got stuff, right? Are all the people that we want to be able to have access to this stuff, are they already in an existing team? They're already all together. And is it a breach of security if everyone on the team sees this content?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Content, people, permissions.
Right.
And it's always HR.
Oh. So it's like, yeah, they're all on the same team, and it doesn't matter if everybody sees it. Usually, if we're in this scenario, they're like, well, but we just don't want there to be a lot of channels. We're just trying to keep a lot of channels from cluttering up people's view, which is great. As a consumer, I appreciate that. But that's not a need for special security. That's a training need to show people how you can hide channels and mute channel notifications, right? If you know that most people don't care about it, show them how to hide it. Then if we say, well, no, all the people that we need to get to this stuff or this document, they're not all in the same team. We want to create a private channel and then bring in a few extras.
Yeah, I get that asked all the time.
Yeah, you can't do it because you still have to be in that Microsoft 365 group.
Right.
So right there, you don't have to go any further. You need a cross-functional team. Right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's two big scenarios. Then we have the sorta. I mean, yeah, they're all in this team, but I don't want everyone to see it. And it is a breach of security if everyone on the team sees it, but it is about the team.
Yeah.
That's your cubby hole, right? That's your sweet spot.
Yeah.
To bring in that private channel. It should be an exception, not a rule. Otherwise,
Yes.
what are we doing here? Are we really on the same team or not?
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. That last thing you said there is absolutely the piece. It's the exception, not the rule, which means if you're out there advertising that you have private channel capabilities, then you're missing the point of private channels. And I don't mean that you should hide the fact that private channels exist, but you shouldn't be sitting there going, well, do you need a private channel? Do you need a private channel? No. Find out what they're trying to accomplish. And then, if a private channel is the right solution, it's the right solution. But it's the exception, as you said.
The exception.
So.
I had to talk some people kind of out of their tree once because they wanted to create one big team for their whole department and then give every functional area their own private channel. And they came to me because they're like, well, we can't, the planner's not working and that this isn't working and that this isn't working. I was like, okay, because you're taking your group and you're kind of pulling it apart.
Yeah.
And we kind of talk through it. And they're like, well, is it too many teams for every functional area to have their own team? It's like, are you going to have more than 2 million? No.
I like that response.
You're fine. You're going to be fine because if I'm not on that team, I'm not going to see it. It's not in my way. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's actually, it's really interesting. Is it too many teams conversation? Like there is a question of limits because Office 365 does still have limits. There's a limit to the number of teams someone can create. Is 2 million the limit of teams that you can have, or is that just the number you pulled out? I can't even remember.
Actually, during COVID, the limit for the number of site collections in a tenant bumped up that high.
Okay. All right.
I believe it's only 30 for private channels. So
you only get 30 private channels.
So you want to limit those and be aware of that. That's the limit.
So there are limits. There are technical limits, but then there's, what was I talking about?
Usability limits.
Yeah, but then there's the usability conversation. And it is so interesting to me that how often I have that conversation when talking about teams where someone's like, well, what if we have too many teams in my company? I'm like, how many of your people have access to all of your teams? Like that's really the question, right?
Well, we're kind of team happy where I work, Microsoft. Don't know why. But so I was just talking, my manager was saying periodically, like once a month, he goes through and hides all the teams that he doesn't care about. So
yes.
It's just because anybody will make a team and add you to it.
Yep.
I don't do it that often, but yeah. Go ahead, Joy.
I started hiding all of the teams per week that I'm not in a lot that week because, client work, right? Ebbs and flows. Because it auto-alphabetizes them.
Oh.
And we kind of have a standing rule. If you really need one of your coworkers' attention, mention them. So
Yes.
that way, I mean, I'll go unhide, I'll go, open up my hidden teams and I'll look for the bolded stuff or the channel or the team mentions. But unless someone mentions me specifically, I presume no one has a dire emergency where they need me. And it works really well.
So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but I have seen people on Twitter complaining that being mentioned, right? Well, I'm a member of the team. I will see that eventually. I'm like, not if you're on 30 teams like I am, right?
No, you won't.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, unless you're extremely OCD and there's a bold channel somewhere.
I feel terrible for those people.
I do too, because I don't care.
Like when
I
it
had a
comes
friend
to
look
folding
at my
my
phone
fitted
and saw
sheets.
my unread email and
Yeah. No, when it comes to folding my fitted sheets, I'm very OCD. But when it comes to the bold face, like A, I'm inbox 33,000 right now. And B, like when it comes to the bold face notifications, like it doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
It doesn't. And if you hide it, it means even less.
Yes.
My boss isn't going to ever see this, right? But
I mean,
I
we don't
doubt
have
it.
that many viewers. You're probably fine.
We're not even sure we're going to see it. Okay, well, I think that was a pretty good talk, a pretty good discussion. It was probably about a half hour, right? So I think we could kind of try to wrap this up. Joy, if we wanted to hear more about this, I know you talked at SharePoint Houston today, right? Or something to that effect, M365.
I did Houston today, and that was on rethinking intranet navigation, hubs sites for the modern world. Did Cincinnati 2 Fridays ago. Did I do Teams and Architecture? I think I did Teams and the Architecture there.
You're doing Chicago on the 13th.
Chicago's coming up. I'm super excited. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
We are too.
And do you have any other ones in the mix?
So
will you be talking during Thanksgiving? Will you be at the Lions game? Halftime show.
Well, I think I'll actually be in Alabama trying to get my mom packed up to move to Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
I think that'll be fun. But yeah, I'm on Twitter quite a bit at Joy of SharePoint. I retweet recordings of past webinars that I do for my shameless plug at my Joy of SharePoint webinar series. Excellent. But yeah, we know community rocks, right? And the more of this kind of information we can put out there for people to help them figure out what to do with all these changes that are kind of always seem to keep coming around the corner, I think the better. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities for information out there.
Cool. Well, I will gladly post all of the links to everything you just described, from the webinar series and the Twitter and all that. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I hope that this was not a waste of your time.
Oh, this was super fun. I appreciate you all inviting me to come and talk. As you said before we started, I like to talk. So I get to talk about SharePoint.
And you're good at it, so that helps. That's
okay.
Where me and Jay struggle, you do well.
I've never had anybody tell me I struggle to talk before. Maybe struggle to talk coherently, but not. So Joy, thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the 13th in Chicago.
Yes, in Chicago, virtual.